Good morning. I want to thank Jude for the shout out this morning, and he's not wrong that I'm a regular. I went to the doctor the other day and they drew blood and it was brown. You know, we're doing a series called American Idols, and this morning we're talking about sex. I'll tell you, like I told my students when I was teaching health and we came to sex education, don't ask questions, don't laugh, and we'll get through this. I told this a couple of weeks ago, but many years ago, my children wanted a Nintendo Wii. You remember Nintendo Wii? You could bowl and play tennis and all these other sports. And so they begged and begged for a Nintendo Wii. And so we broke down one year and for Christmas bought them this gaming system. And they were so excited. As they tore the wrapping paper and noticed what it was, they were elated and they hugged and kissed on us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It was a good moment. But from that point on, things changed. Now all of a sudden, they got more selfish. They started arguing with one another about whose turn it was. They became mad when they lost a game. They used to spend a lot of time outside. Now they were zoned out in front of the television like zombies. They even told their mother and I about friends who had other games that they wished they had, and they were almost upset that they didn't have the things that they did. And I thought, what happened? How could such a good gift go so wrong? But it's what happens when the gift becomes more important than the giver. For my kids, the beauty was in the Nintendo Wii, but for Libby and I, the beauty was in their reaction, their love for us, because we got them the gift. And this is not a problem that is relegated to children. We see it among adults all the time. I battle with it myself. We take the gift and we make an idol out of it. And now we're worshiping the blessing rather than the blesser. Blessings become gods, gods become tyrants, and tyrants become slave drivers. That's how it works. And this is certainly evident when it comes to sex. Sex is beautiful until it loses its spiritual context. In our culture, there are two extremes when it comes to sex. Sex is God, sex is gross. Typically, that's where most people will land. Somewhere in that spectrum, you'll find a lot of other people, but a lot of times we see it either as obsession or suppression, idol or taboo. In the church, we often just ignore it at all costs, and the reason why is because it's a bedroom issue, and it makes us uncomfortable, right? We wiggle and squirm when we even hear the word. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you're watching a movie with your parents and a love scene comes on, and even if it's rather tame, you get nervous and you get squirmy and wiggly because it's uncomfortable, right? And the same is true in the church. We hear the word, we hear the subject being talked about, and we wiggle and squirm. And meanwhile, our culture is immersed in it, and we're keeping silent. Everything in our culture, it seems, is saturated with sex. Pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Your kids, even at an early age, are being inundated with sexual images. Marriages are being destroyed by a lack of sex, extramarital sex, or lackluster sex. Yet in our churches, we remain tight-lipped for fear of making ourselves uncomfortable. And that's truly sad. If we do talk about sex, we often zero in on how destructive it can be. We talk about all the don'ts, and we use scare tactics to try to steer our teens away from sex. We sometimes act like sex is a tool of the devil rather than a gift from God. And so here's the message that we often send. Sex is the most scandalous, most sinful, most shameful thing you could ever engage in. So you better save it for somebody you love. Genesis 1, 27 and 28. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Notice that God blessed Adam and Eve. And after blessing them, he told them, go and have sex. In essence, that's what he says. Be fruitful and multiply. Sex within the confines of marriage is not gross, it's not dirty, it is a blessing, it is a gift, but we must understand the conditions and limitations associated with the gift. Sex is something that God intends for a man and a woman to enjoy as part of the marriage covenant. It is a unifying act. It brings couples together. It is an honorable expression of love and intimacy. It is not man-made. It is God-designed. But it is only God-ordained when it occurs within the confines of marriage. God created sex and He put up a no trespassing sign. But there's a reason that God placed boundaries on the gift. Because in His infinite wisdom, He knew the devastation that it would cause. He was well aware of the power of lust. He knows all about urges and the temptation to fulfill those urges. He knows all about the allure of the god of sexual pleasure, and He is keenly aware that Satan is going to pull out all the stops in order to entice people to bow down to this idol. The god of sex whispers in our ear and attempts to entice us to remove all the restraints, remove all the boundaries, and to run free. So it's crucial for us to understand that God has put these restraints and these limitations and these boundaries in place for our own good. It's kind of like, imagine you have a daughter. For some of you, that won't be too hard. And your daughter comes to you and she wants a pet. And you say, okay, you can have a pet. She wears you down. You say, okay, I will let you have a pet. But that pet cannot bark or meow or moo or whatever. That pet cannot shed fur, and that pet has got to cost $5 or less. Well, that greatly limits the kind of pet that she gets to choose. But she lands on a goldfish. She picks a goldfish, she names it Nemo, and she brings it home, and she decides that one day she wants to take Nemo out. You can't walk a goldfish, but she decides that she is going to put it in a glass filled with water, and she's going to take Nemo with her to the swimming pool. And she jumps in the pool, and she begs her dad to let Nemo come in the swimming pool with her. And Dad says, no, that wouldn't be a good idea, because there's poison in the pool. There's chlorine, and it wouldn't be good for little Nemo. But still, Nemo is sitting by the pool in that glass filled with water, and the pool looks so enticing. And so after a while, daughter, dad, look, and Nemo's not in the glass anymore. She had flopped and flipped and everything else and got out of the glass and is now swimming around in the pool somewhere. And now dad and daughter have the unenviable task of trying to find Nemo, right? And so they notice Nemo swimming around in the deep end of the pool, loving life, having the best time. And catching a goldfish is not easy. Finally, Nemo wears out and goes belly up. I feel Nemo's pain, don't you? That glass was so restrictive and the pool looked so enticing. And once Nemo dove in, it felt so right. But what looked like pleasure was actually poison. Nemo learned that the restriction was there out of love, and that freedom meant destruction. And such is the case with God and His restraints. The boundaries are there not to keep us from pleasure, but to keep us from poison. When we worship the God of pleasure instead of the God who gave it to us, then we don't discover that there's unending pleasure. We actually discover that the pleasure is gone. You make pleasure a God, and you get poison in the end. You ever noticed how much of the Bible is dedicated to idolatry? It's almost as if God is trying to tell us something, right? I don't think that's an accident. God's greatest gifts can easily become His greatest competition. God knew this. Jesus knew this, which is why He taught on it so often. Therefore, it is paramount that we keep His blessings within the proper context, enjoying them, but not worshiping them. Do you remember that Disney movie where this guy really falls in love with his half-sister, and he lusts after her, and she refuses his advances, and so he rapes her? You remember that Disney movie? No, you don't. Because it's not a Disney movie. It's actually a biblical story. And it's found in 2 Samuel chapter 13. And here's what it says. Now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. So Amnon was tormented. Your version may say obsessed. That is idolatry language. It's all Amnon could think about. His lust for Tamar filled his thought life to the point that he made himself sick. And then you keep reading. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man. And he said to him, O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me? Amnon said to him, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Jonadab said to him, lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill, and when your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat, and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat from her hand. So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. And she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, send out everyone from me. So everyone went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hand. And Tamar took the cakes that she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. So Amnon has a friend who is concerned as to why Amnon looks so haggard every morning. What is wrong with you, friend? And Amnon tells him. Basically, he's lusting after his half-sister. He's got to have her. And this would be the point where if you're a true friend, you would say, whoa, that's weird. Like, you can't do this. That's sinful, that's wrong. You got to cut this off immediately. But he doesn't. Instead, he helps him concoct a plan so that he can finally have his way with Tamar. He says, look, send everybody else away, have her come in, cook you a meal, have her feed it to you, and then you can take it from there. Wink, wink, right? And that's exactly what happens. When his half-sister comes to cook for him, he told the other servants that their services were no longer needed. And then Amnon instructs Tamar to come to his bedroom and feed him. And what happens next is heartbreaking. But when she brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come, lie with me, my sister. She answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be as one of the outrageous fools in Israel. Now therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he violated her and lay with her. So Amnon rapes his half-sister, Tamar. Tamar responds by putting ashes on her head, tearing her clothing. That is a sign of mourning as well as suffering. And these actions also symbolized her loss of virginity. And as is the case with many sins, especially sins that are devoted to idolatry, there is collateral damage. This was a royal family. And there was a ripple effect that was felt throughout the kingdom. Everything spiraled out of control, all because Amnon couldn't get control of his lust. Make special note of Amnon's post-worship response. Then Amnon hated her with very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up, go. What a weird statement, right? I mean, he hated her more than he had loved her in the beginning, really? What exactly did Tamar do? I mean, she was simply the victim here, and he wanted her to leave. Why did he hate her in his heart? Because Amnon discovered what so many sexually obsessed individuals eventually find out, that the God of sex just doesn't deliver. Worshiping the God of sex will cost you, and it's never worth the price that you have to pay. So why do so many people prostrate themselves before this God? Well, I think you know why. Because of the pleasure that it brings. That pleasure is momentary. It's fleeting. And the cost lasts. So what's the answer? Well, we know the problem. We could talk all day about the problem, but we got to be practical. How do we deal with this idol? What can we do to crush this idol so that we no longer sacrifice at its altar, but rather sacrifice at the altar of the big G God, not this little g God? How do we destroy this God? How many of you know what GIGO is? You ever heard of GIGO? It's an acronym. Garbage in, garbage out. You know, so when computers first came out, they were not as widely accepted as they are today. And the early manufacturers of the computer learned that a computer was only as good as the data that was being entered into it. So if you input good data, you're going to get a good outcome. Bad data, bad outcome. If the raw data is bad, then the computer is worthless. And so the programmers came up with a word to express this truth, or an acronym, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Your input determines your output. If garbage goes in, then that's exactly what's going to come out. It's the same sentiment, just said in a different way by Paul in Philippians 4 and 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Paul says, garbage in, garbage out. True things in, true things out. Honorable things in, honorable things out. Purity in, purity out. Righteousness in, righteousness out. The basic premise is one that we see play out in people's lives all the time. If you don't take control of your thought life, then garbage is going to come out. If you let garbage in, that's exactly what's going to be dispensed. Which is why Paul stated, we are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. It's been said that the average human has like 10,000 separate thoughts a day. I think that comes out to like 3.5 million thoughts a year. Many of you have already had hundreds of thoughts this morning. And you'll probably have hundreds more, maybe even thousands more before the day is over with. And do you know what each one of those thoughts represent? They represent a decision. They represent how you're going to deal with whatever it is that pops into your mind. What are you going to do with that input? Actions begin in the mind. Make no mistake about it. You can't just think about sin and then stop short of sin. It doesn't work that way. You've got to get control of your thoughts because that's where sin begins. So taking every thought captive is absolutely essential if we want to successfully avoid spiritual failure. You have to control your thoughts. And how do we do that? We could ask it this way. How do you change your mind? Paul mentioned this in Romans 12, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. How do we renew our mind? What does that look like? Well, you got to evaluate your input. Garbage in, garbage out. Analyze your input. What are you filling your mind with? What kind of books do you read? What podcasts do you listen to? What movies do you watch? What TV shows are you tuning into? And now you're thinking, well, this is the old disconnected preacher who thinks, all my problems will be solved. I'll just delete Snapchat. Maybe, I don't know, but I've lived this. I didn't grow up in the church. I lived a life that was less than stellar when it came to spiritual matters. I know all about garbage in, garbage out. And I know this, you are never going to successfully defeat any idol, much less the idol of sex, if you don't get control of your thoughts. Make the necessary adjustments. Don't spend 2 hours at church every week and every other hour of the week focusing on things that will pull you away from God. Secondly, be stubborn. Many times in dealing with sin, we don't say no. We kind of waffle. Maybe. The devil can work with maybe. Not that she's a devil, but we had a lady come to our house many, many years ago trying to sell us a carpet cleaner. She knocked on our door. My wife answered. She said, I want to sell you this carpet cleaner. It's only like, $2,000 or whatever. And we were like, we're not interested. And she said, well, to show how good it is, I will gladly, for free, do 2 rooms in your house. Well, we were going to shampoo our carpets anyway. This sounded like a great deal. We don't have to buy it. There's no obligation. We'll just let her come in and shampoo a couple of rooms. And she did, and afterwards she gave her sales pitch, to which my wife was like, I don't think so. I really appreciate it, but I don't think we want to purchase one at this time. And she said, what if I lowered it from $2,000 to $750? And my wife's like, I don't think so. And so she left. And a little while later, there was a knock at our door. And it was the big boss man. And he was angry. He was mean. He was pushy. You mean you're going to let her come in here and shampoo these carpets and you're not even going to purchase this after all the work she did? What if I drop it down to $350? So we've come from $2,000 to $350. And eventually, I hear what's going on. I come in the room as well, and both of us are like, yeah, get out of our house. We're done. And you shut the door. That's how you get rid of that pushy salesman. Satan can work with maybe. As long as you're waffling, as long as you're saying, I don't know. Maybe. No, you slam the door. You push him out, you slam the door. Be stubborn and defiant. Anything less is an invitation to turn up the heat. And then change your diet. I'm not talking about physical food. I'm talking about spiritual food. Change your diet. I don't know if you're like me, but I find myself sitting on the couch scrolling through Facebook or social media thinking, why am I doing this? And then I switch gears and maybe read my Bible or do something a little more productive. It's easy to fall prey to allowing all this junk food into our minds and into our bodies. I've got a problem. I like chocolate mini donuts. You know that. Don't get me any more. I don't eat them as much as I used to because they're not good for me. Right? Why do we take in all of this junk food when we know that it's bad for us? And you know the answer. It's the same reason why we eat junk food physically instead of something healthy. Let's face it. If you have a Snickers and a turnip sitting there, which one are you going to pick? Maybe that's not the best analogy because nobody likes turnips. So let's say you have Snickers and like broccoli or something. Well, I'd much rather have the Snickers. Snickers satisfies, doesn't it? For about 30 minutes. And then I'm hungry again. And it doesn't do anything for me as far as nutritional value. Feast on God's Word. Memorize Scripture. Underline, highlight, make notes about key thoughts and phrases. Talk about what you've studied with your family and friends. Don't just read it. Read it with a purpose. Read it with intent. Read it with a question. What is God saying to me? Not what do I want God to say? What is God saying? Don't settle for junk food. Read with application in mind. If you want to change your mind, then you've got to feed it. And you can't feed it with the junk food of this world. You've got to feed it with a steady diet of soul food. And I would say this. And if you get nothing else out of the lesson this morning, please, please, please hear this. Until you hate the outcome more than you love the taste, you will never change. Until you hate the outcome more than you love the taste, you will never change anything in your life. I love chocolate mini donuts. I just don't like what they do to me. I love the taste. I hate the outcome. You ever have food remorse? You ever eat something you feel bad about it later? I feel that sometimes. I think, why did I eat that? Some of you are like, no, I don't feel bad. And I'm not here to judge you. But until you hate the outcome more than you love the taste, nothing is ever going to change in your life. Idolatry is far more severe than eating junk food. And I can preach on the dangers of it until I'm blue in the face. I can warn you of the long-term spiritual effects. I can do my best to even try to scare you into submission, but it all comes down to this love-hate thing. Until you hate the outcome more than you love the taste, nothing's going to change. There was this old Native American man who was explaining to one of his friends that it's like he has this battle going on inside of him. And he described it as a black dog fighting with a white dog. And his friend says, which one wins? And he says, the one I feed the most. And certainly, that is the case when it comes to idolatry. Which God is going to win the battle for your heart? The one you feed the most, right? The one you sacrifice to the most, the one you bow down to the most, the one you love the most is the one that's going to win. Change your mind. Get control of your thoughts. Be stubborn. Be aggressive. The devil is, and we often think when it comes to fighting the devil that we just got to hunker down and hope that he, passes by. That if we play dead, maybe he'll leave us alone, or we just got to withstand it somehow. No, be aggressive towards him. Why can't you be aggressive towards him as he is towards you? Be stubborn. Be defiant. Draw a line in the sand and say, for no reason at all am I going to step over it, nor am I going to allow you to step over it. I'm not opening the door to this. I'm going to be stubborn, and I'm going to change my diet, and I'm going to eat things, I'm going to feast on things that only profit me spiritually. Can we do that? Look, I know it's a struggle, and I know that this is not something that's going to get fixed with one sermon. And I know that many in our congregation struggle with idolatry. I wouldn't do this series if I didn't feel like it was necessary. But you got to understand, I preach to me first. And I figure if it's a problem for me, it's probably a problem for a lot of people. So I feel your pain. Let us help you. We're going to offer an invitation, but maybe that's not the time you feel is necessary for you to come forward and seek help. Maybe you need to come to me privately, or Chad, or Steve, or Chris, or Kyle, or one of the elders, and let us help you. Life is too short, and your spiritual welfare is too important to continue to bow down to a little g God. But if we can help you this morning by praying with you, maybe you're ready to put on Christ in baptism. Whatever your need is, why don't you come as we stand and as we